Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. The Emperor's New Clothes is a classic fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, and it tells of a vain emperor obsessed with fine clothing who falls for two swindlers claiming to weave magical fabric invisible to fools or to the incompetent. Swindlers, posing as weavers, convince the emperor and his couriers of an imaginary suit's existence. All pretend to see it to avoid seeming stupid. And during a public parade, a child innocently declares the emperor naked, shattering the illusion as the crowd echoes the truth. Well, I came across a list the other day that kind of reminded me of this story. You've heard of people that want to be called a different pronoun than their biological sex, right? Like he, him, she, hers, they, them, z, zir, eggs, them, I don't know. These are all just some of the preferred pronouns that people want to be referred to as. Well, the other day I came across this list by Sam Dillon Finch, and it's entitled 10 Things You're Actually Saying When You Ignore Somebody's Pronouns. Yeah. So I thought we'd go through this list today and kind of highlight some things. Can we? The first thing they have on the list, number one, is I know you better than you know yourself. Again, these are 10 things that you're actually saying when you ignore somebody's pronouns. I know you better than you know yourself. Okay. Let's just start with the fact that if you think that you are something that is different than God created you to be, then you either have a mental condition or you have been brainwashed or convinced of something that is untrue, or both, really. God created us either male or female, period. You can wish to be something that you're not. You can try to make your physical body look like something it's not, but it does not make you the opposite sex. You can think that you are both sexes or either sexes or, whatever, but this is the same thing. If you think you are something that you are not, then I actually do know your sex better than you know yourself. So to say that I'm telling you I know you better than you know yourself, well, maybe I am. So in this case, number one, I might agree with you. Number two, I'd rather hurt you repeatedly than change the way I speak about you. If me calling you something that you don't agree with hurts you, then you have some growing up to do. I have always had very light blonde hair and fair skin. That's just me. When I was in school, I was constantly being called an albino. I am not an albino. I don't have pink eyes, okay? I just have the genes from my mother's Swedish side. So after many times of being called an albino, I had a choice to make. Do I dwell in my hurt for being called something that I'm not? Or do I just understand that they are incorrect about what they're saying about me and leave them to their ignorance? I chose the path that gives them no control over me or my emotions. All right, number three, your sense of safety is not important to me, is what they think I'm saying if I don't use their pronouns. Your sense of safety is not important to me. This one is similar to the last one, but takes it actually even a step further. How is my opinion of you have anything to do with your personal safety? How is what I call you have anything to do with your personal safety? There was a time in this country that if you did not know the particular sex of an individual that you were talking about, that you would default to using masculine pronouns. If I was waiting for the plumber, for example, to come to my house, I might ask my wife, do you know when he is going to get here? I I don't know if the plumber is a male or a female, so I default to he, him pronouns. I think I can safely say that by doing this, I have never put anyone in danger in any way. Number 4, your identity isn't real and shouldn't be acknowledged. Okay, let's talk about what is real then, right? Since they brought the subject up, what is real is that a male is a male and a female is a female. Unless you are a very rare case where your DNA is not, strictly XY or XX, your identity is male or female. Okay. And I will even say here that even in the cases where your DNA is not XY or XX or whatever exactly, you're still a male or a female. You are just, it's like if I was born without an arm, I would still be a human, right? Just because I didn't have all my limbs. Well, God stitched you that way before you were ever born, a male or a female. Your body developed in a way that was consistent with one of the two different sexes. Just because you believe yourself, stuck in the body of a different sex doesn't mean that your identity is different than what God created you as. Okay? The we we do see people who are, male, but kind of have a little more feminine traits and vice versa. But God created you a certain way. So just because you believe something does not make it real. Okay. If you believe that you're a male, but you're not, you're a female, it doesn't make you a male. Just because you believe something does not make it real. If I believe that I'm a dolphin, for instance, right? I don't, but if I did believe I was a dolphin, it does not make me a dolphin. If I believe I'm a dolphin, it does not make my identity real, and it should not be treated as such. All right, number 5. I want to teach everyone around me to disrespect you. How is telling you the truth disrespect? I would think that telling you a lie would be disrespect. I would think that allowing you to believe a lie would be closer to disrespect. If I act like your lie is truth, then I am disrespecting you. I am belittling you. One of my grandmothers ended up with Alzheimer's. She did not understand certain things about reality. We had her in our home for about a year and a half. And when it just got so bad that we had to put her in a memory care facility. And they told us one thing. They said that if she thought there were little Martians coming down from the sky, that we were to play along and ask, well, what color are they? This was because she did not have the mental capacity to understand reality. If I act like you don't have the mental capacity to understand reality, I am disrespecting you, not the other way around. All right, number 6. Offending you is fine if it makes me feel more comfortable. I have to address 2 things on this one. First, there are going to be times when I offend you. Heck, I may have already offended you now. The, the Bible calls itself a stumbling stone, meaning that it will offend you at times. Jesus was crucified in part because he offended a lot of people. There are a lot of things that we do that will offend people. I am offended when you say that you are a mistake and that my God created you in the wrong body. You will be offended at times. And guess what? It's okay. And second thing I wanted to address here, I am not using proper pronouns for you because I want to feel comfortable. I don't use them to feel anything at all. I don't use them to feel anything. I use them because I don't want to be a part of a lie. I use them because I always strive to be on the side of truth. If I was to go along with your little mind game thing here and use your preferred pronouns, it would make our relationship, whatever that looks like, so much more comfortable. But I don't. I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm actually on the side of truth, which tends to be a little uncomfortable at times. Number 7. I can hear you talking, but I'm not really listening. That's what you're telling me when you do that. Well, this one is really interesting to me. This is almost belittling to say. And of course, I am listening to you. Do you really think that I'm not listening to you when I call you by your proper sex? Do you really think that just because I don't play your silly little word game, it means that I have not heard what you are saying to me? I hear what you're saying, and I disagree with you. But that does not mean that I am not listening to you. Oh, and by the way, just because you say it doesn't make it true. You might get offended by that. But number 8, being who you truly are is an inconvenience to me. All right, this is so backwards, it's not even funny. Who you really are is not determined by what you think or who you identify as. Who someone is in these cases is the opposite of who they think they are. I actually am calling you by who you truly are. I am not calling you by what you are not, because I am calling you. This is what is offending you. All right, let's keep on going. Number 9, I would prefer it if you stopped being honest with me, is what you're telling me. No. But this is very similar to the last one. It is something that liberals tend to do a lot. It's called projection. They call you the very thing that they are. They say that you are doing the very thing they are doing. They do it because they want to distract from what they are doing. So that you look at yourself or you get defensive and you leave them alone, type of thing. In this case, I am being honest with you by calling you by your proper pronouns. You say that I am not being honest with you, but who is the one being dishonest, really? And number 10, I am not an ally, a friend, or someone you can trust. All right. In the story, the Emperor's New Clothes, as we talked about at the beginning, who was the one that he could trust? Was it all the people that played along with the lie? Or was it the little child that told the truth? Who was the real friend? And who was his real ally there? So I know I get a little bit going sometimes with some of this, and I know it can come across strong. So I wanted to share this with you because I really thought it did a good job of balancing the answer to the question, should Christians use preferred pronouns of transgender individuals when referring to them? And it came from Got Questions, and I think it's gotquestions.com. And it says transgenderism's embrace by popular culture presents Christians with difficult choices. Among those is the issue of personal pronouns. Words such as he, him, his, or she, hers, her, things like that. In some situations, those who wish to identify as the opposite of their biological sex prefer to be spoken of using pronouns that correspond to their preference, not their biology. For example, a male who self-identifies as female might ask to be referred to as he or she. Beyond this, some persons claim to be completely different genders or combination of genders. Some persons might ask to be referred to using pronouns such as they, them, or even new words like sie, zim, zer. So, does that mean a Christian can or should use preferred pronouns, even just to be polite? Or should believers make a point of not using such terms at all to avoid endorsing something untrue? As with many specific issues, the Bible does not give an explicit word-for-word answer. There is no thou shall or thou shall not for the use of modern preferred pronouns. What believers can do is look for guiding principles in order to make the best choice in a given situation. So, in short, while Christians need to be careful and respectful, respect cannot extend to endorsing ideas that the Bible calls false. Whatever choice a Christian makes with respect to preferred pronouns, it's important that they not give the appearance of endorsing sin or self deprivation. At the same time, believers ought to tread lightly on any issue that touches on sensitive emotions. Some Christians may conclude that preferred pronouns are simply not an option. Embracing those terms rather than factually accurate pronouns is to speak or write in ways that agree with something false, like in Isaiah 5:20. The person in question, in reality, is a member of a particular gender, not whatever gender he or she prefers or feels. As such, using pronouns that imply something else is at least inaccurate and might be construed as dishonest and hypocritical or a rejection of biblical ideas. Other Christians might conclude that refusing to use preferred pronouns would be the equivalent of constantly voicing disapproval, leading to added stress or conflict. From that standpoint, believers might decide that pronouns are not an issue about which they need to fall on their swords. Especially in cases of professional and personal relationships, believers may feel that it's best to pick their battles rather than take a rigid stance on such terms. But of course, since this is not a black and white issue, Christians might find themselves varying between both of these options, depending on the circumstances. Christians ought to consider at least three major themes when it comes to the issue of preferred pronouns: respect for all persons, personal relationships, and speaking the truth. Beyond these three themes, it's useful to understand the difference between personal pronouns and personal names, secular concerns with this issue, and the use of gender pronouns with respect to God. So, respect for all persons. Let's go there. Even when disagreeing about an important issue, believers must act in gentleness and with respect, like in 1 Peter 3:15. Rebuke and condemnation have their place. That's Proverbs 27:5 and Titus 1:9. But when a person is sincere and seeking mercy, and seeking mercy is supposed to be the guiding principle, Jude 1:22. No matter how a Christian chooses to handle the issue of preferred pronouns, It's imperative to do so in as gentle and peaceful a way as possible. Romans 12:18. All people are broken without Christ. We know that from Romans 3:10, but acting in gentleness does not require believers to lie and betray their conscience or give a false sense of support. Romans 16:18 and Acts 5:29. It does, however, mean that that Christians cannot justify approaching the subject in a careless or callous way. So that brings in personal relationships. As with many issues, one's approach to transgender issues is affected by context and audience. Referring to a third person, such as a celebrity who is not present, is markedly different from having a face-to-face conversation with a coworker or family member. Interacting with a friend is different from discussing the issue with in some public way with a complete stranger, let's say. Varying circumstances don't alter what's right or wrong, but they do influence how or when a believer engages. This is part of being, as they say in Matthew 10:16, wise as serpents and harmless as doves, being careful and sensitive to those who are hearing or reading one's words. And then there's, of course, speaking the truth. The reason preferred pronouns present a dilemma for Christians is that they imply something the Bible indicates is false. What a person can, the false thing is that a person can change genders or be born into the wrong biological sex. Referring to a person who is biologically male as she or her is, in literal terms, to say something untrue. Worse, when it comes to an issue such as transgenderism, using preferred pronouns can be construed as enabling or endorsing a harmful, unbiblical situation. From a spiritual standpoint, even a scriptural standpoint, the literal intent behind preferred pronouns is unbiblical. Men are not women, and vice versa. Other than a tiny percentage of persons who are biologically intersex and deserving of special consideration, there are no third, fourth, fifth, etc. genders, nor any basis for a person to choose such a thing. For the same reason that believers ought not to pretend that other faiths offer salvation. We know that from John 14:6. Or that other gods are real, 1 John 4:1. Or that something sinful is morally right, Isaiah 5:20. Many believers conclude that it's immoral to enable the basic premises behind the use of preferred pronouns. And this is why, at the very least, all believers in all circumstances need to be careful not to give the impression of accepting the assumption behind preferred pronouns. While Christ was merciful and loving to both the adulterous woman in John 8:10 and the woman at the well in John 4:23 and 24, he gave no mixed signals about their sin. Equally important to consider is the believer's primary mission to reach lost people for the sake of Christ. Part of reaching them is sharing the love of Christ. As unfair and inappropriate as it might be for someone to demand other people use words they prefer, unbelievers cannot be expected to think and feel like believers. We know that from 1 Corinthians 2:14. Conceding the use of preferred pronouns, some Christians would argue, is a form of going the extra mile, so long as it's clear we're using such words as a gesture of respect, not in agreement. Each Christian needs to weigh these concerns when deciding how or if to discuss the issue of preferred pronouns. Truth is important, but that does not mean the choice not to use preferred pronouns has to be handled, rudely or cruelly. So pronouns versus names. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Personal names are different from personal pronouns. Names are an indication of which particular person or place or thing is being discussed. Pronouns, on the other hand, imply that person, place, or thing is. Like certain names might be culturally unusual, but using the name of a person, a name a person prefers, is not the same category as using the pronoun a person prefers, if that makes sense. So let me give you an example. If a person's name is Charles, he might prefer to be called Chuck, or a nickname such as Ace or Slim, right? Actors and entertainers actually often use stage names professionally. In this way, it's arguable that the use of names in modern culture is merely to identify the particular person, not to define them. So, if Chuck wants to be called Betty, that might be odd, but it's not the same as actually saying Chuck is female. But then again, one could argue that using a preferred name chosen because it corresponds to a preferred gender is also a form of enablement. So, what about secular concerns? Preferred pronouns also create issues from a secular standpoint. Without taking religious values into account, the previously stated, using words like he or she implies something about the biology of the subject. Forcing people to use preferred pronouns then would literally be coercion of speech. Demanding that others use such terms implies that you have a right to force other people to speak or write in ways that agree with you. As a parallel, demanding use of preferred pronouns would be like insisting that others refer to us as Your Majesty with a bow or a curtsy because we feel like we are royal blooded, even though they don't believe we are. And again, Christians should weigh a reasonable need to contend for truth. Again, Jude 1:3. And contend for truth with a command to be accommodating to others when appropriate. Matthew 5:41. So gendered pronouns and God, because this comes up occasionally. In a shallow sense, the Bible does present an instance of preferred pronouns when it comes to God. The Bible overwhelmingly uses masculine terminology for God, including frequent allusions to him as Father. This is despite the fact that God is not literally male or female. However, God's preference for he and him is not a reasonable parallel to the use of preferred pronouns as related to transgenderism. First and foremost, God does not claim to actually be a literal male, or that using such pronouns implies that he is actually a literal male. Preferred pronouns, as applied to human beings, can suggest a gender difference from what's biologically or physiologically true. With God, this is not the case. In contrast, those who dogmatically call God her or she are really referring to a different deity, in the same sense that a Muslim might use the words like God or Allah, but mean a being with a totally different nature. Those who insist on using gender neutral or female terms for God are effectively speaking to a completely different being from the biblical God. So complications of the fall kind of plays a role in here. Human sin has resulted in a fallen world. We know this, Romans 5:12. That sin, by its nature, confuses and complicates issues that God has otherwise made clear. Unfortunately, issues such as preferred pronouns create difficult choices for Christians. And while followers of Christ want to be loving, caring, and peaceful, it is It is also important to obey God rather than man. And that includes speaking truth in love rather than shrinking from controversy for the sake of social comfort. Where the balance of those concerns falls in any given moment is something for each believer to prayerfully and carefully consider. And I'll just say this, is that I do believe that if we, in most circumstances, if we are using preferred pronouns that are different than the biological sex of that individual, we are condoning and we're playing along with that false game. That we need to be speaking the truth. Truth is big, and it may be uncomfortable for us to do it. It may cause problems. It may offend people, but and we are to try not to, be unloving. We are to try to, use some tact, but we are to tell truth and not condone sin. And I believe we're doing that oftentimes if we are playing along with the preferred pronoun game. I'd love to hear what you think on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.